Hi everybody, and welcome to the fourth video in this DIY garden room build series. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to install the roof on a garden room. This is quite a simple job, and I honestly believe that anybody with even a small amount of DIY knowledge could follow along with this and quite easily install a roof themselves. So what you can see me doing at the minute is marking out the joists on the wall plate. I'm just stood on a little ladder marking the 400 centres. So basically the joists are going to be spaced 400 apart. Now the goal here is that the plasterboards that we board the ceiling with below are going to be 1200 wide. So our plasterboards basically want to land halfway on a joist at 1200. Now to do this, the first mark that you make should actually not be 400. It's going to need to come back 20 mil. And the reason for that is because you're coming from the wall where you're not actually in the middle of a joist, you're starting from a straight edge. So the 380 is essentially going to bring you to the middle of the first joist, and then every joist there afterwards will be 400 millimeters apart. And essentially when you get to 1200 and you measure from the wall, 1200 will land exactly on the middle of the third joist. So just remember that when you're marking out, the first joist should be marked at 380 millimeters. And then everyone thereafter will be 400. Okay, so you can see that I'm marking these out with a pencil and a square, and it's relatively simple. You're just going to work your way along, and then when you've done one side, you can come along to the other side and just do the exact same process so that your joists line across to the marks on either side. Once you've got everything marked out, it's just a case of lifting the joists up. These garden rooms are not particularly high, so it's not that difficult to do this on your own. Obviously, if you've got somebody to help you, that's great, and it'll lighten the load, but these joists weren't terribly heavy, and lifting them up, I'm quite tall, so it was relatively easy. If you are a little bit shorter, you might need to use a step ladder or something, but even still, it shouldn't be terribly difficult. So there's no point in spending too much time here adding them, really evenly spaced. Just get them up there initially, and then you can deal with that afterwards. And you can see this process from the front as well, where I'm just finishing it off, putting them up. Okay, so once that's done, we're just going to fix the joists on either end. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to measure them out here to just over 300 millimeters. This is going to give us the gap on the bottom that our soffit is going to fit to. So essentially, when we put a timber on the front of these, it should come to maybe like 310 millimeters total. That just gives us a little bit of wiggle room so we can get our soffit on underneath, which for this job I'm using a 300 mil hollow soffit on the front of the building here. So this is the most important measurement essentially. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to screw the joist in place from below, and I'm also going to nail it from above. So I'll do that at either end. As you can see now, I'm just coming along with my cordless drill, and you'll see my hand just come up now and pull the joist down, and then I'm just going to drive a screw through the top of the stud-work into the bottom of the joist to hold it in place. And then following that, I'm going to put my battery back in the nail gun, and I'm going to also nail from the top just to get an extra strong fixing. Now I should add all of these joists where possible, so all of the ones on the back and everything on the front that isn't above the lintel is screwed with 2 screws from below to get a really good hold, and then also nailed from the top. Above the lintel, because we can't screw from the bottom, I'm basically spiking 2 screws either side of the joist to hold it down. Okay, so we're moving to the other side. I'm just going to make sure that's exactly the same measurement. So essentially it's about, at this point, this would have been probably around 260 if my memory serves me correctly, because obviously we have to put a piece of timber on the front, which is around 50 millimeters. You can see I'm climbing up here now, and I'm going to put a screw in the bottom of this. There you go, so now I'm going to put a screw in the bottom. And also just add a few nails as well to hold that in place. Okay, so once that's done, it's time to put a string line across the front here. So to do that, I'm just going to add a screw either side. Basically, the screws are going to let us wrap a string line around the front of each of these joists at either end, and that's going to give us a straight line straight along of all of these joists. So you can see now I'm going to go to the left hand side and put another screw in. And then I'm just going to wander off and find my string line so we can put this across the front. And that's going to give us something that we can move the joists towards, just so they're 100% straight along the front. Another thing to point out here as well is you should always make sure that the joists, when you're fitting them, or at least when you're putting them up, you try and put any curves or bows to the top of the joists. This is best practice, and it'll also stop the ends being uneven when you put your front timber on. If you've got them with the bow to the bottom and the bow to the top, and they're not even, you'll often find that the front of the joist doesn't line up very well, and then you've got to pack them up and mess around with them, and it can affect your ceiling and cause you all kinds of other problems. So just always have a little look down the timber and make sure any bellies and bows and stuff like that are to the top of the timber. Okay, so once we've got that done, we're going to come up to the top, and I'm not going to waste much time here because it's just a case of moving them up to the string line and fixing them in place. So I'm using screws and nails here. Above the lintel, I'm going to be screwing it down. There's also a few cases where there might be a twist in the timber where a screw is going to help you to pull it around. But for all intents and purposes, we're just fixing either side up to the string line. And as you can see there, they're nice and straight. And in this next part of the video here, you can see that I've added a timber along the front as well. My neighbour actually helped me with that, and he didn't want to be on video, so I didn't film that. But it was pretty simple. We just cut it to length, 2 fixings in the front of every joist. And then you can see here on the side, I've added a little piece of decking board that I had lying around underneath that front piece of timber, and also underneath the back piece, just overhanging slightly so I could just sit the side piece of timber on. And then once that's in place, I'm just going to fix that with 2 screws at either end. So one at the top. Then I'll just make sure the end's nice and flush, which I believe here it just needs a little tap over just to get it right. And then I'll just pop a screw in the bottom as well. Then I can move along to the other side and do the same at the other end. So it's pretty simple. It's not very complicated at all. Essentially, you're just adding another joist that's kind of floating at the minute. But what we're going to do is we're going to add some noggins in between here and ladder these last 2 joists, the one that's on the edge on the inside and this one that's overhanging, and that'll hold it nice and securely and sturdy so it can carry the roof. So again, just 2 fixings in the back. And then we can just take these supports off, and I'm going to move over to the other side and do that now. But you don't need to see that. You've seen me do this side. It's exactly the same process. So we will actually move on to the laddering now. Okay, so here we are, up on the roof. Now, I will say, obviously be careful doing this. It can be helpful if you've got a second person with you just to keep an eye on things in case you do fall. Just be careful, just make sure you're sensible and you don't end up falling off the roof. But again, this is pretty simple. I've just cut a lot of noggins here. I believe there's 5. And I've just divided them evenly along the length of this joist just to create this little ladder. And it's just a case of 2 fixings in either side just to hold these in place. Obviously I'm using my nail gun here. If you don't have a nail gun, you can screw these, or you could even use a hammer and nail. And this is just going to give that end piece of timber that's overhanging the edge a lot more stability and strength, so it can hold the roofing material up. And it's going to give us a nice little overhang, which is, I think, just a nice detail to the roof. Okay, so this is pretty simple, so we're going to speed this up in a minute just to get this finished. And we'll move on to adding the OSB to the roof. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like when you're done. We've got both sides laddered. The kind of edge trim pieces, I guess maybe you'd call them, are on. And basically we've just got that lovely overhang all the way around now. So we've got about 150mm at the back. We've got around 100mm on either side. And then we have our just over 300mm overhang on the front, which you can see there. Also, if we come inside, you can also see that I've added some noggins down the middle. These are 1200, and these are not actually for the plasterboard internally. These are more for the OSB that we're going to be using on the roof. I'm also going to be putting another row in at the front, just along here, at 1200 again. And that's going to allow us to have all our edges of the OSB landing on a timber, so there's no edges floating in midair essentially. So this is a job that I ended up doing on my own. I didn't struggle too much getting the timber up onto the roof, the OSB up onto the roof, but you know, it might help to have somebody to assist you lifting these. I mean, it would have been easier if I'd have had somebody else, but I managed. But just be careful, you know, make sure you lift with your knees, not your back, obviously, with stuff like this, else you could end up putting your back out. But yeah, we're just going to throw them up onto the roof and then just sort of maneuver them around, and then eventually we can get up and fix these. Personally, I screwed these down. If you're using tongue and groove, like roofing boards, then by all means you can nail them. But for me personally, I just prefer any surfaces, floors or anything like this, I prefer to screw them. I just think it gives a better fixing, and you know, it avoids the fixings moving in the future. Okay, so once you've got these up, you can climb up and screw it down in place. Now, this was kind of getting towards the end of the day, so you can see the camera's moved now, and I've come back the day after just to finish things off. And again, it's a little bit cooler today, so I've got my jumper on and I'm going to be lifting these boards up. So same process, just slide them up, get them onto the roof. And it's just a case of lining them up with the boards that are already there and just screwing them down. Very, very simple at this point. So again, you know, you're up on the roof, you're working at height here. Do be careful, don't walk backwards off the edge or anything daft like that. Just be aware of where you are and, you know, make sure you're careful. And, you know, obviously if somebody can help you, it does help to have a second pair of eyes on the job, just in case you do fall off or, you know, you do have an accident up there. Okay, as you can see now, I'm just screwing this down. Nothing complicated. I'm putting around 4 fixings in every joist per board. And as you can see, this is how things look up on the roof where I'm working. And you can get a better idea here of exactly what I'm doing up here in terms of screwing it down. I'm just lining them up, making sure there's no big gaps. I'm checking towards the edge to make sure the board doesn't need any more cutting off or it's not been cut too short. And then I'm just fixing it down with screws. So for the screws here, I was using 2-inch 10s, just standard wood screws. These are going to be covered by the rubber roof, so they don't need to be anything special in regards to getting wet or anything like that. They're not going to be outside, they're going to be under the rubber sheeting, so just standard wood screws are perfectly fine here. And that's it, we can just speed through and finish it off, just adding this last piece to the front, and that's it guys. It's a pretty simple job, I think you'd agree, and yeah, I mean, I definitely think that anybody can do it. Obviously, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to help. And I will see you in the next video.